Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show.
Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Sanjay Prasad on the line, and he's a partner over at Appleton Luff. Sanjay, welcome to the show.
Hi, Adam. Good to be here.
All right, Sanjay. So we're happy to have you here, and a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, executives listen to this show, and what we'll be talking about today, intellectual property, real big topic and really important for business owners to grasp the importance of it and what it can mean in their business. So maybe just to get us kicked off so people will understand a little bit more about your background, tell us a little bit more about what you're doing over at Appleton Luff, please.
Sure, Adam. So Appleton Luff is an international law firm specializing, we call it international economic law. Involves trade, investments, and intellectual property. I'm an intellectual property specialist. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area, along with my partner, Elizabeth Chen-Hale. Last year, we opened up the Appleton Luff Silicon Valley office. And I spent my career on intellectual property. I started off as a chip designer, as a computer engineer, and then became a lawyer. And I've spent my career working on advising companies on their intellectual property, on protecting their intellectual property, on licensing it, both to others and from others, and then defending companies and claims by others. And I've worked across a number of industries, automotive industry, medical devices, and most recently being in the Bay Area, a lot of tech industry work.
So you're definitely the person, based on that background, that I want to ask this question to, because you're absolutely qualified, obviously. Really, for business owners and just businesses in general, why does intellectual property matter so much?
Sure, yeah. So the reason why it matters, Adam, is that it's increasingly important to businesses. Physical assets nowadays, they comprise a relatively small fraction of businesses' total value. If you look at the valuation of companies on the public markets, and if you look at their physical assets, those are only a small fraction. The rest of it is intangibles, and a lot of that is due to their intellectual property. And so certainly companies that are in tech-related industries, software, semiconductor, communications, also automobiles, industrial companies, a significant part of their valuation is now due to intangible assets, which is a lot of that's intellectual property. And the intellectual property is really what differentiates companies and gives it their competitive edge. And so understanding what that is and protecting that is important. But those companies also, they'll need to use the intellectual property of others. And so the understanding what IP to license and to buy and so forth, that's also extremely important. And now I've talked about kind of tech-oriented companies or R&D-oriented companies, but IP also plays an increasingly important role in other companies. For example, a retailer, nowadays pretty much all retailers need to have a website. And the content on that website, some of that will be content it'll be images and text from others. Some of that will be the business's own content, and the collection of that content, that's intellectual property. And so they'll need to understand, for example, if they're hiring a web designer, who's going to end up owning the results of that work. That can matter. And also give the company, the business, a competitive edge in some instances. So it's increasingly important, really, for all businesses.
No, it's a great example. And so I guess the simple way I like to think about it is that, like, there's Apple, then there's Apple the brand, right? There's Starbucks, and there's the, intellectual property behind those logos and everything else, and the cup and the design and all these things, and all of that has a value, right?
That's exactly right. Yep. And so you just identified at least two different types of intellectual property, and there's trademarks in the branding. When you look at the Apple products, they have a particular look and style and feel to them, and that's protected by trademark law. But also a lot of the content there, that'll be copyright law, and then there will be either the ornamental designs or the operation of the product that'll be protected by patent law.
No, that's great. It's great. So let's go a little bit further. Let's go get a little bit more niche, and there's quite a bit of tech audience listening. So how does that work, or how can you get patents on software and like these different things? I want to break this down a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And so that's a good question. I've worked in the software industry for quite a long time. I was in-house, led the in-house patent group at Oracle Corporation for a number of years. And then in private practice, I've tended to spend a lot of my time on software. And the short answer is that if you have an innovation in software, then yes, it is eligible to get a patent on. Of course, it needs to meet all the other requirements. It needs to be new. It needs to be not obvious. You need to describe it. You need to do a little bit more work on a software technology to get a patent, because you need to describe it as one of the patentable types of things you can get. So you can get patents on methods and machines and articles of manufacture. And so you need to describe the software in that way in order to get a patent on it. And patents are national things. You get them country by country, and the laws will vary from country to country. So if you want patent protection in countries outside the United States, you'll need to make sure that you follow their rules also in terms of describing your invention, so that it'll be eligible for protection in those countries. A lot of countries have in their laws, they have a provision that says that you cannot patent software per se, meaning that you can't claim the software as an invention. But so long as you claim it as one of the types of inventions that are protectable, methods, machines, and so forth, then you can generally get a patent on it.
So you mentioned you had history with Oracle. Can you tell us a little bit more about that recent Supreme Court decision in Google versus Oracle?
Sure. Yeah. And so my involvement with Oracle actually predates the Google versus Oracle case. This is a case that's been going on for a very long time. The facts, the activities that led to the litigation, they started in 2005, 2006, as I understand it. That's about right around the time that I left the company. And what happened was, this is going back to the early days of smartphones, and Google needed to move its platform onto the mobile mobile platform, and so they developed Android, and the Java programming language that was very popular and on desktops and servers, and they needed to be able to use that on Android. They looked at Android and realized that they would need to have a license from, at the time it was Sun Microsystems that developed Java, and Oracle later bought it. But they realized they would need a license. There were some negotiations. Those broke down, and Google went ahead and copied certain aspects of the Java application programming interface anyway. And as we all know, Android went on to become an enormous success, widely used by tens or hundreds of millions of people around the world every day. Oracle ended up suing Google back in 2010. The lawsuit was recently resolved almost 11 years later ultimately by the Supreme Court in a decision. In the meantime, they had two different trials before, two different jury trials. They had two different appeals up to the appellate court. And then finally, it went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court doesn't hear very many cases per year, only about 100, 120 or so cases a year. And so intellectual property cases will always comprise a very small number of those. Some terms it's no cases, other terms it's one or two. And so every time they hear an IP case, it's important. And so this one was around the issue in copyright law of what's called fair use. And so fair use is something we've all probably run across. If you have a professor in class who's using an article or showing a movie or something like that, they don't need to get a license from the content owner from that because that's for educational purposes. That's a fair use. Similarly, if you reproduce portions of a book or something for commentary or for news reporting, that's also fair use. One of the important things about this Google versus Oracle decision is that it was fair use in the context of software, and this was clearly a commercial use and it was purely a commercial use and a very significant one in the orders of billions and billions of dollars. And normally when we advise clients on fair use, we try and be conservative. One of the things we tell them is that if it's a commercial use, then it's going to be harder to show that it's a fair use. And this decision really changes that. Because this is a purely commercial use, and they tried to limit it to the facts, but any Supreme Court case is never limited purely only to the facts of that case. It's a precedential decision. And so this is going to change quite a bit. It stands to change quite a bit in the software industry, in terms of what people regard to be a fair use in using other people's software and not taking licenses. So it could have a very significant impact in some cases.
So Sanjay, last question, two-part question. So Number one, if somebody's listening to this and they want to connect and they want to learn more about your firm and your team, what are typically the right types of clients that are a good fit to work with you and your team? Number two, what's the best way for them to follow up and to connect and to get more information?
Sure. So let me take the second one first. That's an easy one. AppletonLuff.com is our website, and you can find information on all the firm's lawyers there. For myself, our IP group, we work with a broad range of companies. They tend to be, we tend to be regular advisors to growing companies on their IP needs. And then for larger companies, we're retained to work on special projects. Transactions, we'll advise them on licensing. Sometimes some M&A, we'll advise on the IP aspects of that. And in disputes, we'll advise on how to go about handling a dispute because they can get very complex at times. And then also we will work with the other lawyers. We have lawyers around the world in the U.S. and Europe, Asia and Africa. And coordinate matters that will come up various places around the world.
Fantastic. Well, Sanjay, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and all the great work that you're doing over at Appleton Luff. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Definitely want you to be a return listener and return visitor. And Sanjay, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, Adam. Thanks for having me.